(592 BC). Ezekiel's living creatures. On a summer morning in 592 BC, beside the Kebar River, a Babylonian exile claimed he watched something descend from the sky, blinding, roaring, and utterly unfamiliar. The man was Ezekiel, a priest turned prophet, and he described what he saw using the only language available to him: fire, polished metal, beating wings, and wheels that moved without turning. He dated the event precisely, the 5th year of King Jehoiachin's exile, and recorded it at the very start of the prophetic book of the Bible that bears his name. Copies of the account would later surface among the Dead Sea Scrolls, confirming that this strange report circulated centuries before Christianity and long before modern ideas of extraterrestrials. He says the air came alive. A storm rolled in from the north, wrapped in lightning. At its center was a structure, quote, gleaming like electrum, a metal known for its pallid, almost electric sheen. Then he saw what he called hayot, or living creatures, each with 4 faces and wings that, quote, beat together, sounding to him like, quote, the roar of rushing water. Their legs were straight, he added, and, quote, sparkled like polished bronze. And beneath them, this is where the vision becomes unmistakably strange, were wheels, quote, one inside another, able to move in any direction without turning. Their rims, he wrote, were full of eyes. For centuries, theologians read the passage as metaphor, a symbolic vision of a divine throne chariot. But in the late 20th century, an unusual set of readers took an interest: rocket engineers. One of them, Josef Blumrich, a senior NASA engineer who helped design the Saturn V, set out in the 1970s to disprove the growing ancient astronaut craze. Instead, he quietly reversed course. Parsing the available texts and diagramming the motion described, he concluded that Ezekiel might have witnessed a structural craft, a central fuselage, 4 landing legs, and rotor assemblies whose spin could explain the blinding brightness and omnidirectional movement. He called his reconstruction the spaceships of Ezekiel, and he presented its logic, even its potential engineering flaws, with a seriousness that startled his colleagues. Others, like theorist Eric von Daniken, had gone further, suggesting that the living creatures were not symbolic beings, but biological operators, extraterrestrial crewmen, whose appearance Ezekiel strained to translate into the language of priests and shepherds. Critics dismissed the theory as imaginative overreach. Theologians insisted Ezekiel was describing a vision, not a machine. And yet, the original text remains unusually detailed, almost insistently mechanical, as though the prophet were less intent on allegory than on reportage. More than 2,600 years later, the account refuses to settle. It sits at the uneasy border between scripture and speculation, inviting us to ask the question Ezekiel himself never could. What if the first chapter of his book isn't only a vision of God, but a record of something that landed? 743 AD, the airship of Clonmacnoise. On a quiet Sunday morning in early medieval Ireland, something impossible drifted over a praying congregation. Not an angel, not a vision. A ship, rigged, crewed, and sailing through the sky. If someone reported that today, it would land in a UFO database. Instead, it ended up in medieval history. The story is now nicknamed the airship of Clonmacnoise, after the great monastery on the River Shannon, one of early Ireland's most important centers of learning. What makes it linger isn't just the image, it's how early the claim appears, and how often it repeats. In the mid-8th century, Irish annals, year-by-year monastic chronicles, record a blunt, baffling line. Ships with their crews were seen in the air. Multiple sources place sightings in 743 and 748, and the annals of Ulster go further, putting a ship and its crew above Clonmacnoise itself. At first, that's all we get. No explanation, no miracles, just ships in the sky. Then, over the centuries, the story starts to gather more detail. In later medieval versions, a ship hovers over a public assembly. A sailor leans over the side, throws a spear at a salmon, misses, and then does something that shouldn't be possible. He climbs down and swims through open air to retrieve it. When people on the ground grab him, he panics, crying out as if he's drowning, not in water, but in the world below. In Irish myth and tradition, salmon are often linked with wisdom and otherworldly knowledge that doesn't come free. The tale also gets anchored to recognizable places. In the Book of Leinster, the wonder is tied to the Great Assembly of Tailteann, where 3 ships are said to navigate the air above the crowd during the reign of Donal, son of Murchad. And the most famous version arrived from outside Ireland entirely, a 13th century Norse text. Conan Skugsja, the King's Mirror. During Mass, an anchor drops from the sky and snags on the church. A sailor slides down the rope, moving his arms and legs, quote, like a man swimming in water. The congregation seizes him. Only the bishop stops them, warning that the stranger will die if held, just as a man drowns underwater. They release him. He swims back up. The rope is cut. The ship sails away. The author adds a chilling postscript. The anchor remained behind as proof. Medieval readers did not see this as fantasy. They instead mapped the encounter onto existing beliefs, specifically the belief in an upper sea. Drawn from the Book of Genesis, these were believed to be literal waters above the sky. But from a modern angle, the pattern feels uncomfortably familiar. A structured craft, intelligent occupants, a body that can't tolerate our environment, and a brief, chaotic attempt at contact. And the witnesses, at least on paper, weren't bards spinning tales by a fire. They were monks and chroniclers, men trained to write events down in ink. Whatever people thought they saw over Claude McNoy's in the 8th century didn't stay. It passed overhead, slipped into the margins of the annals, and left behind a story that still hovers, just out of reach, between history and the unknown. The Cloud Sailors of Magonia. Around the year 815, before anyone ever spoke of flying saucers or little green men, 4 people stood in chains before an angry crowd in France. The charge against them was extraordinary. They were accused of falling from ships in the sky. The scene was witnessed by Archbishop Agobard of Lyon and documented in his book On Hail and Thunder. These 3 men and 1 woman, the crowd insisted, weren't ordinary peasants. They were cloud sailors from Magonia, this land believed to float in the sky, hidden in the clouds. According to local belief, the Magonians sailed in weather ships, descended during storms, and stole crops from battered fields before vanishing back into the mist. And everyone believed it, as Agobard wrote that, quote, nearly all men, noble and common, thought hailstorms were man-made, summoned by magicians known as tempestari, who sold their services to the aerial thieves. Farmers even paid them tribute to spare their crops, more willingly than they paid tithes to the church. The belief spread so widely, the government got involved. Charlemagne, years before he was crowned emperor, issued a reform order he called the Admonitio Generalis, which warned against tempestari, along with other forbidden practices. If this was just a myth, why did a future emperor make rules about it? And why did Agobard have to step in to stop a crowd from killing 4 alleged cloud sailors? Agobard's writings were reportedly lost for centuries, until a manuscript resurfaced in Lyon in 1605 and was republished in 1666. The story might have remained an obscure piece of medieval history if it weren't for computer scientist and UFO researcher Jacques Vallée. Vallée is perhaps best known for advising astronomer J. Allen Hynek's work on Project Blue Book, the U.S. Air Force's official UFO investigation program. In 1969, Vallée resurrected Bishop Agobard's story in his book, Passport to Magonia, where he proposed a radical theory. Vallée claimed that aliens might not be extraterrestrial at all, but interdimensional beings that become entangled with the folklore of each age. Medieval peasants saw angels, fairies, and cloud sailors in the sky. Today, we see flying saucers. So is Magonia a forgotten delusion, or a veiled memory of encounters with something older and stranger? 1645 AD, the abduction of Anne Jeffries. She sat alone, knitting beneath the low branches of a Cornish garden. Then a rustle, a laugh, and 6 small people in green stepped through the hedge. One climbed into her lap. Moments later, she was gone. Not missing, taken. The year was 1645. The girl's name was Anne Jeffries. 19 years old, she was a servant in the Pitt household in St. Teith, Cornwall. By the time she returned from wherever she'd been, palaces of gold, dancing spirits, a world unlike our own, she was no longer just a servant. She was something else entirely. Anne's story is one of the strangest ever recorded in early modern England, and perhaps the first documented alien abduction. It was no passing tale. Her experience was captured in a 1647 letter in the Clarendon manuscripts, and later in a first-hand account from 1696 by Moses Pitt, the son of her former employer. For over 350 years, her case has blurred the boundaries between folklore, mysticism, and the paranormal. At the time, the beings Anne described were believed to be fairies, but her account closely mirrors modern reports of alien abduction. Small humanoid figures with glowing eyes, sudden paralysis, blindness, and then flight. She claimed she was lifted into the air and transported to a dazzling world of palaces, lakes, and radiant beings who spoke in song. When she returned, she brought back strange abilities: clairvoyance, healing by touch, and the ability to live without food, saying, quote, "The good people sustained her with invisible bread." Word spread. The sick and desperate came in droves, begging for miracles. She predicted visitors before they arrived. She cured her mistress's injured leg with only her hands. She claimed she could make herself invisible. But England in the 1640s was no place for prophets. Civil war had just ended. Royalists were defeated. The old order upended. When Anne began relaying messages from her fairy companions, some supporting the king, she was arrested. Not tried, not hanged, but imprisoned in Bodmin, starved for months. She survived without eating. The mayor's letters, preserved to this day, confirm it. Modern neurologists suggest her visions may have stemmed from temporal lobe epilepsy. The symptoms: visions, auditory hallucinations, sudden trances, fit. But that doesn't explain how she predicted injuries and healed the sick, or how she emerged from prison unharmed, still radiant with her strange power. Anne Jeffries lived until 1713. In her final years, she refused to speak of the fairies. Quote, "If I might have 500 pounds for it," she said, "I would not have my name spread in books and ballads." But her name survived anyway, and so did her mystery. 1491 AD, the Aerial Men. On the night of August 13th, 1491, 7 beings stepped out of the air and into a scholar's study in northern Italy. They wore shimmering garments, spoke of academies and disciples, and calmly explained that they were not angels or demons, but men made of air. If this were a modern account, it would sit comfortably beside reports of extraterrestrial contact. Instead, it was preserved by one of Europe's most formidable scientific minds in a published book from 1550. The witness was Fazio Cardano, a physician, lawyer, mathematician, and occult investigator whose reputation for seriousness made his stranger claims difficult to dismiss. Cardano worked in Pavia and Milan, moved easily among scholars, and counted Leonardo da Vinci as a friend. He studied medicine and natural philosophy at the University of Pavia and built a career on rational inquiry, while privately admitting to decades of contact with non-human intelligences. The encounter itself comes to us through his son, Girolamo Cardano, who recorded it in the mid-16th century book De Subtilitate. According to the account, the 7 visitors appeared after ritual preparations at the 20th hour of the day. 2 figures led the group, attended by followers. Their clothing glistened purple and gold. Their bodies seemed solid, yet strangely weightless. They claimed lifespans of up to 300 years. These aerial men, or homines arii, as Cardano called them, said they lectured publicly in an academy, one teaching 300 students, the other 200. They debated cosmology and metaphysics and described a rigid law forbidding them from freely sharing knowledge with humans. Despite their power, they admitted they were mortal, capable of birth and death, though their lives spanned centuries. Then, after 3 hours of discussion, they vanished. In separate encounters, Cardano described otherworldly beings with cold, cotton-like hands, partially intangible, who tried to enter his body. The sensation was so bizarre, he insisted it could only have come from a body made of air. Centuries later, the story caught the attention of renowned nuclear physicist and chemical engineer Jacques Bergier, who presented the vision as evidence of ancient extraterrestrial visitation. To Bergier, the shining garments suggested luminous beings from another world. Yet the details complicate that conclusion. The clothing described by Cardano matches almost perfectly the ceremonial dress of a Roman. Purple fabric, gold ornamentation, shining red footwear. During Cardano's lifetime, such imagery saturated Italian culture. Artists painted it. Princes reenacted it. Anyone with a classical education would recognize it instantly. Which leaves the mystery intact but transformed. Either a disciplined Renaissance scholar experienced an encounter that reads uncannily like contact with an advanced non-human civilization, or he framed something far stranger using the most powerful visual language his culture provided. 500 years later, the aerial men still stand in the room, waiting for us to decide what exactly stepped out of the air that night. Were any of these encounters with actual aliens, or perhaps other types of non-human entities? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you for watching Dark 5. Like and subscribe to continue exploring the greatest mysteries of this world and beyond.